Well, hello everybody in Beijing. I'm very sorry I cannot be with you, but I had other commitments in London that I couldn't leave and come over. So I hope this is an acceptable alternative that I will make my presentation online. My topic is about employment skills in the age of AI, and in particular, I'm going to cover four topics here. First, I'm going to talk about the impact of technology on growth in jobs in general terms. Then I'm going to move on to some old work of mine, in fact, borrowing on a way of thinking how technology influences jobs in terms of frictions. And then I'm going to apply the frictions to AI. And finally, I will talk about preparation for the frictions in the sense, what can we do to reduce these frictional barriers on AI? It's a long agenda, but I'm going to try and squeeze it in the required time. So here we are. We start with technology and jobs. The theme then is that we know that economies are changing continuously because of shocks, and the main shock that I want to study is technology. In fact, technology is the main shock that drives economies, but sometimes you get reforms like China did with the opening up, for example. Now, when new technology arrives, and we need to make a lot of changes in the economy as well, in investment, for example, and in employment allocations. And these forces in an open market economy, like both our European economies here in the United States, China are when it comes to the economy itself, is that there are forces that will push the economy to a new equilibrium. Now, the feature of these forces that I'm going to focus today is that they are slow. And the question is, why are they so slow? And can anything be done to accelerate the adjustment to a new equilibrium? Now, we know, sorry about that, we know that new technology causes growth. Growth theories have written endlessly about that and rising living standards. My focus, again, is not on the growth impact of new technology, but it's on the fact that when growth comes along, the technology will also bring structural transformations. As some of you might know, I've written on structural transformations with Rachel and I, and I'm going to borrow extensively from our joint work. Now, the impact on jobs from the technology is twofold, and the two are quite distinct, although you wouldn't know it if you read the current literature. The first impact is that technology is replacing workers directly. For example, in agriculture, you might get a mechanical digger, and that replaces the worker who was sitting on an ox cart, for example, to dig the ground. Second, though, which is the one related to the structural transformation, is that when technology arrives, then there is usually a change in the relative sectoral outputs, and jobs get reallocated according to the economy's demand and supply in each sector to restore balance. In fact, my work with Rachel focused on the second point, whereas the work of many others, Asimov and Restrepo and Otto are probably the best known. I've also written with a former student assistant of mine called Capitano on robots manufacturing, and many other people, of course, have written about that. Was about the first effect, how much substitution is going on. So the first effect, the substitution, is the one that has attracted most of the public discussion and most of the recent economic literature, as it matters. When you read about in the papers about is AI taking our jobs, are robots taking our jobs, it's precisely that effect. David Otto's work on computers have taken mid-level jobs is precisely on that. He focuses on the substitutions and what kind of jobs have been taken, robots taking unskilled jobs, manufacturing. All that's about the first effect. I'm calling it that the Luddite effect, because the first historical event that we have about that is related to the Luddites. I mentioned a little bit about them later on, actually. It's quite an interesting case, as I hope you discover later. And that's the effect that really scares workers. If you ask workers about new technologies and they say, oh, no, I'm going to lose my job, that's precisely what they're worried about. The second effect, however, is when technology affects some sectors of the economy much more than other sectors. If you take robots, for example, robots are affecting manufacturing much more than they're affecting nursing, for example, or personal trainers, if you like. You don't have a robot giving you that. That unbalances outputs in the economy. the sectors that are affected more by technology are producing too much. The economy needs to adjust. And usually the adjustment procedure there is that workers leave the sectors that produce too much because demand elasticities are not very big, and they go to the sectors that don't benefit from productivity growth. And this can explain, for example, the decline of agricultural employment, the decline of manufacturing employment over the last century, and the growth in the service sector. And the first person who pointed out that precisely and laid out some conditions was William Bowman in the 1960s, and that's why I'm calling it the Bowman effect. As I was saying, this is also the effect that we expanded on in my work with Rachel and I. Now, today's technology, of course, is AI. That's what everyone's talking about. There are large disagreements about the impact. Technologies are usually very negative. They think the world is coming to an end because of the direction that AI is taking. Economists, however, are not that pessimistic. Some are pessimistic, but others are optimistic. I should say that I belong in the optimistic scenario. I believe more the optimistic scenario for reasons that I don't think I have time to go into here, but it makes a very interesting discussion in the pub or in the coffee or in the tea house. We know that the economy needs to adjust to artificial intelligence because firms are using it already, so the adjustment should be underway. So how can we think about the impact of technology on jobs? And that brings me to my second topic, which is a framework to study the impact of AI on jobs. Now, if we think about the labor market in terms of supply and demand of hours of work, which is a traditional way of thinking about it, I don't think we're going to get very far in terms of the impact of AI on jobs. Instead, what I like to think about is my jobs framework in matching theory. You might say I'm biased because I know about it. Well, of course I am. It's the one I understand best. I know most people are using a task-based approach. The task-based approach actually, which I think originally was due to Simon Restrepo, it's easier to study the growth effect of AI, but I don't think it's easier than what I'm going to outline here if you want to study the structural transformations. And I hope that I will convince you about that later on. Now, what is a job? Well, a job is a bundle of activities or tasks, like in the task approach, that the firm will create the job and the worker will join the firm and take it to make it productive. Now, let's think about a labor market that is consisting of jobs, not of hours of work or of tasks. Then employment is just defined as the aggregate of all active jobs in the economy. An active job is itself defined as a productive match between a firm and the worker. I hope you'll know about these things. And we know that there are many different types of jobs. To be productive, a firm should want the worker to take a job, and the worker should want to do the job's tasks in that job. So we have two-way matching in a way. They both agree to match, and then they negotiate the wage and all that. Now, jobs, of course, could change partially. They lose some of their components, some of their activities or their tasks, if you prefer to use the term, or the whole job could just disappear when new technology arrives. The worker could change jobs within the company or leave and get a job elsewhere. Now, typically, of course, most of the changes of jobs, of what we do at work, take place within the company. And I define that as a role change. Some of the things that you do in your job continue in the same way, some others change. Like many of you, I guess, we've been at our jobs for years and years. I'm fairly bet that I probably beat you all. If you hear how many years I've been at the London School of Economics, my job has changed a lot. If I go back even 20 years, 30 years of what I was doing, but teaching is still the same as it was then. But the way I do my research is different. I'm sure you've had the same experience. That's what I mean by role change. My role there has changed, but the job is still there. And what I'm going to talk about here in terms of adjusting to AI, it involves the role changes as well as the job changes. I don't think it makes much difference. Now, why do I find that a useful framework? The reason is that if we are going to explain the slow adjustment to technology and AI, then we have to think about frictions in the labor market. Frictions are basically barriers to the smooth and quick adjustment of the labor market to new shocks. A new shock arrives, and then you want to change both the employer and the worker, but you cannot do it immediately because there are some barriers that stop you from changing that, from adjusting to this new world. And the question is, what are they? And how can we make sure that we minimize that effect, because it cannot be welfare improving. Now, the main frictions that can be identified when technology arrives are the three that I mainly used in my book: the information frictions, that we don't quite know where the shocks are taking us. We don't know what's happening to jobs. And therefore, we might search for information, and that takes time. We may not know where the jobs will be located, whether we need to move, change sector or location in the economy. And we don't know if the skills that we have now will be good enough for the new jobs that are opening up. Now, a fourth friction has been pointed out more recently. Daniel Susskind, in his book, points it out. It's called the identity friction. I quite like that. In fact, it's as it applies to all their workers, the idea that if you've been working in the same job in the same environment for years and years, and suddenly they tell you, "Oh, these kind of jobs are no longer available, and you have to change," then it might be tough on some people. You know, like imagine us academics, for example, we've always been teachers and academics, and suddenly they tell us there will be no more university jobs, go and find another one in the market. We're not going to like it very much. But even more, manufacturing jobs have been lost, and you tell a manufacturing worker, sorry, you have to find another job. They might say, well, I've always been a machinist, what can I do? You know, maybe they can drive a taxi or something, but there aren't enough taxis to employ everyone. And that's the idea behind it. Now, if we're going to understand AI and how the free economy to that, is that we have to identify exactly what frictions are applying to AI. Now, as you know, with everything, all of them will apply to someone when AI arrives, but the question is, which are the most restrictive, which one should be operating on? So there you go. Let's see how AI works and why we have these frictions. Now, we did a lot of field research there by interviewing workers and employers in the UK, and also seeing what is being written in the press, in social media, and so forth. It's obviously that workers are very worried about the impact of AI on their jobs. That just means that they don't know what's coming. Employers sound excited that AI would change their jobs, they become more profitable, more productive. But again, they're not exactly sure what AI will do to them. You know, judging by the number of times that many of us are invited to give talks to employers associations and big employers, to workers, and all that. It means that people want to know how others are thinking about it and what's doing it. Now, so what we want to know is exactly what is AI doing to our jobs. What is it going to do now? You know, currently, when you listen to the tech people, you know, I could tell you, you know, Jeff Hinton, for example, what he's been saying, Russell, what he's saying, and many others. In fact, we're working with the technology. They're telling you it's going to destroy us, but then they're saying, oh, you know, it won't destroy us for another 10 years, definitely not. I've just read something in New York Times, in fact, that says exactly that, maybe not even 20 years. But the way it's going, you know, it will destroy us. Well, they've been saying it about nuclear weapons and many more as they're saying it. So I just conclude with a bullet point, very much tongue-in-cheek, borrowing the phrase from Kennedy. Well, in the long run, we're all going to be dead, and if we're going to die because of AI, well, what can we do? Let's forget about it and focus on the short run. Now, what's the response of workers with the uncertainty? Well, again, if you ask workers, what will improve conditions at work for you, given the new technologies are coming? The four things in red that I put there is what they immediately say. They'd like to have better communication with managers and subordinates within the company. They want more transparency about company policy. They want to have better social relations with colleagues, and especially with line managers. And they want more time flexibility, including home working in a 4-day week, many of them say. Now, the first three, and a little bit the fourth as well, are entirely about workers wanting more information. And in fact, that's the way to deal with the information friction when it comes to AI. Just talk directly to other people at work, to your employers. You know, we should go and tell the university, what are you planning to do? Are you planning to install computers everywhere, videos everywhere, you know, automatic lectures that you're going to buy from the big shots of the profession? You know, that's the information. You shouldn't be relying on information from the government or from the press, but about what's going on inside your firm. You might think it's obvious, but in fact, the majority of workers are not experiencing this kind of thing. So obtaining communication about the company's intentions and knowing how to use it is the key to workers. We've learned in our interviews that the best way to communicate internally is through informal contact with workers, with both line managers and subordinates. You can see that they want to have good social relations. Workers prefer informality, not being called by the boss, come and tell you something. They hate that, in fact. They prefer to have tea breaks or lunch together, common restaurants, refectories, and so on. Socialize after work. They enjoy that. It gives them happiness if you look at happiness statistics. And just communicate and collaborate with others in your work environment to gain from each other. It sounds very simple, but it's not. In fact, I saw something written by British employers, the Confederation of British Industry, when they were asked about this, and they said, "Oh, it's very easy. Of course, it's very easy. We know that's what it is, but don't think that it's very easy to achieve it. If you're running a company and you're the manager and you're detached, you're upstairs. You don't just come downstairs and walk amongst the crowds and say, 'Hey, Joe Bloggs, let's go and have a coffee.' It's extremely difficult. And you can understand, especially with the Brits who go to a different kind of education establishments, if I can put it kindly. So that's about information. Now, what about location frictions with AI? Again, it's a problem with AI because there are a lot of agglomeration externalities when you're doing AI research or startups. So when it comes to startups or research in AI, mobility is a problem. Take US and China, for example, the leading AI economies in the world by far, in fact. All their AI activities stand in 3 or 4 places. The United States is huge. Yet, if you don't go to California, Boston, or Seattle with Microsoft, you won't find others working on the frontier of AI and technology. In China, if you don't go on the East Coast, you're not going to do it. You might go to West, wonderful places like Chengdu. You're going to find good food. Well, to you Chinese, actually, I don't like the spice. I don't like the spices very much, but anyway. But you won't find much of AI research, however much you try to achieve it. So mobility is a problem, but people are mobile. The Americans are more mobile than Europeans, and it explains why. It's part of the reason why America is always adjusting to shocks faster than Europe. There are other reasons, of course, like regulation in Europe, but the fact that you need to move is an important factor. In our work in Great Britain, since some of you at least come to Britain for work, you will not be surprised to hear that all the AI-related companies and applies, they're located in what's known as the Golden Triangle of London, Oxford, and Cambridge. Go just an hour further north in Birmingham, for example, and you won't find it. In fact, Birmingham has just been given an award for the jewelry capital of Europe, which I had no idea they were doing, but apparently they're very good at that. But I doubt whether they use much AI in designing their wonderful jewelry. Now, what about skills? The main friction that's of AI, as we discovered, is skills. That's unusual for industrial revolutions. In older industrial revolutions, the skill problem. In fact, in the first industrial revolution, the skill requirements in factories. The first industrial revolution is associated with the factory system. It invented the factory system, basically. Workers had to move away from their cottages and work in factories. The factory system, however, reduced the skill requirements that were needed to the extent that employers hired children. There was no law against child work in those days in Britain. They were paying them next to nothing and making lots of profits. And that's what caused the Luddite movement. The Luddites were specialized, skilled people, skilled artisans, as they were known, designing clothes and furniture and things like that. They get fired. The employers get machines. They let children operate the machines. They pay them much less. And not surprisingly, the Luddites come out and say, "We want to break these machines and we want to do things by hand again." It's a classic case that everyone is using as an example. But in the AI revolution, workers need to upskill. It's the first time, in fact, that workers need to upskill to the extent that they have to. Even when electricity came, they didn't have to learn new skills. Whether you operate a steam engine or one run by electricity, it's not that much more difficult. Now, what are the new skills that are needed in the world of AI? I think it's useful to break up the skills into 2. One is the skills that are needed in the production, and the other skills needed in distribution. I was trying to anticipate the next slide. Don't worry. Now, firms essentially they're looking for workers who understand data. Data is absolutely essential in the new skills and can help each other. And I just put the last bullet point as a reminder because when we talk to highly qualified people like my audience today, we think that those are all the jobs that would be created, but the majority of jobs will not need digital skills. You know, that things like nursing, hospitality, personal service provision. I just mentioned it there. If we had another half hour, then I could have talked more about them, but we don't. Now, let's think of production. In production, you need to know how to plan the production. That's what employers are asking for, how to understand your market, how to develop new products. Manufacturing companies are mainly seeking good qualified engineers, as the more menial manual jobs have been taken over by robots by now. In finance, you need people with economic and financial knowledge. Cybersecurity has become very important, how to do proper due diligence. In all these, you need to understand the data that applies to your market. So data analytics, in fact, is the main skill that applies throughout, but you apply it in different ways and you use different kinds of data. In distribution, you need how to develop and maintain a customer base, how to sell online and deliver the goods on time, how to use a gig economy without reducing the workers there to slavery. Logistics is the key here. And again, you learn about all these things from your data. So general skills that are running through different activities is, first of all, you already emphasize, understand your data, learn how to communicate your data findings and how to collaborate with others in their firm's environment. So that goes back to information frictions. Learn how to attract the customer and communicate well and effectively to keep them tied to the firm. That's what employers say, maintain a customer base, which again, you have to understand what they want, how do they behave, who they are, and all that, which goes back to data. Now, why did I say that skills is the main friction in with AI? Well, we know that because of the digital skills that need to be learned, because of the data analytics that you need to understand now that were not so necessary before. But also, if you look at outcomes, at least in the OECD countries, if you like, over here, all advanced countries are experiencing excess vacancies for workers with AI skills. The European North and the United States are experiencing more vacancies than the European South. But they're still not managing to fill all their vacancies. So it's the skills friction that drives the hiring of workers. It's the skills friction that slows down the hiring of workers in the world of AI. Now, how do we prepare for skills then now? Education. Preparation has to start with education. Now, I'm not saying each country should not teach its own history. It's absolutely essential. Teach history, cultural identity, language. Those things give you your identity. As British, Greek, or Chinese, but STEM subjects are universal. There is no identity about STEM. How do we teach these technical subjects? We need more people specialized in STEM. Employers are always looking for them. You do need STEM if you're going to understand large data sets. We need to start from school. People should stop saying, I don't like maths. Everyone should like it. But I'm saying here, and this is a little bit controversial maybe, you shouldn't specialize too much in that. Just acquire general knowledge in STEM. If you are old enough to have children, don't tell them go and specialize as much as possible, as much as you can in STEM. Just tell them acquire knowledge in everything that has related to that. Two reasons why I don't think specialization is good. The first one is technology is changing very fast and it moves in unknown directions back to the information friction. And today's important specialism may not even be needed tomorrow. So don't push school kids to learn just one thing. Don't put your eggs in one basket when it comes to technology. And the second one is that whether we like it or not, AI is going to take over some jobs. It's already taking over some. You know, ChatGPT and DeepSeek are doing wonderful things. And I bet we're all using it, even if we're not admitting it. Although I guarantee you this ChatGPT had nothing to do with these slides. If you specialize too much in STEM, AI might take the job away from you and then you become a Luddite. So what you need to do is not specialize, but learning how to learn over time, new skills. This is the secret of success. Acquire a general knowledge in STEM that enables you to learn more on the job. As you mature, general knowledge includes the basics of the sciences, all the sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, and all that, and engineering, applied science, and lots of maths, because maths is the language of all the sciences. I don't know if you ever watched The Big Bang Theory on TV, but don't do what Sheldon Cooper did to specialize in just one thing. He succeeded, of course, but that's TV. Lifelong learning, in fact, becomes more important than ever. Become an engineer or an applied scientist and learn new skills with your maths as you grow older. Now, successful companies put aside time for learning to facilitate the lifelong learning. The best kind of learning is the one that the employee owns, in the sense that you're studying for your own good, not because you believe that it's good for someone else. And there's some interesting research that the McKinsey Global Institute did with human capital acquisition. They found that the companies that put aside at least 75 hours a year, call it 2 hours a week, for training on their intranet, were more successful than other companies. They call them the people's companies. Of course, workers need incentives to do the training, and employers that provide good jobs along the lines that we pointed out before. Some of those features will be more persuasive for their workers to do the lifelong learning. Could here means informal interaction with employees, meetings to explain plans of the firm, promotions or pay rises based on performance at work, especially after training, flexible working practices and sympathetic attitudes to family life, how to balance well work-family, diversity within the job, within the company. Those are wanted, so don't believe what Donald Trump is telling you about diversity. It is a good thing, and successful companies pursue it. And here it is. This is the end. The biggest challenge that we're facing with AI is the smooth transition of workers to new types of jobs. Frictions, information to some extent, but especially skills are bringing the mismatches that are slowing us down. Good education, good training on the job, lifelong learning are essential tools to overcome these frictions. And so far with AI, we're discovering that the labor has not been replaced by very much because there is shortage of labor. Firms with advanced technologies require upskilling of their workers, and they should be providing it themselves. More upskilling than any other previous industrial revolution. And the skills friction is the one that will drive the adjustment to the matching of workers and jobs. And we should be taking care of that both through education and training. I should say that China has been more successful actually than Western economies in producing more engineers for technology. But hopefully we are going to get there too. Thank you very much. This is all I wanted to say.